Hello to all of you. I hope you are all having a beautiful day today. My name is Jenny, and this is Buried Secrets. Before I do anything, I want to apologize for using AI to voice my videos. I am currently fighting lymphoma, and for some reason, it makes me sound like an old woman after a few minutes, so we are using what we have until I can get there. The case for today is unbelievable and unfortunately highlights how DCYF, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, fails children in ways that are unspeakable, and their negligence often leads to a child getting hurt or a child losing their life. At the end of this video, I am going to give you an opportunity to be a part of demanding change so that we don't have to keep hearing stories like this, where children with their whole life ahead of them are failed by the system that is meant to protect them. I do want to point out that this case does involve a little girl, so if this is something that triggers you, we totally understand. Come back another day, because we want everyone to be healthy and happy. I don't currently have any sponsors, but I am a single mom battling lymphoma, so I am going to shamelessly plug my 2 small businesses in the comment section, and if you would like to support my channel and enjoy this video, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I promise you guys I do my own research and I will put out great content, but most importantly, comment your thoughts about this case below. I would love to hear from you. I love discussing these cases and I promise I will comment back. Today, we are going to be taking a deep dive into the case of Oakley Carlson. This case needs to be brought to justice, and we need to continue to talk about this case to ensure that that is done. My channel has been a work in progress, and I have to be honest with you guys. I recorded this entire video and then redid the whole thing about 20 times. One, because I want to make sure that I tell this story the right way without overly dramatizing it. It is important to me that you get the truth. And the second reason, I will explain why in a little bit, but the more we share this case, the more we talk about it, the more of a chance we have of bringing Oakley home where she belongs. So, get cozy and let's jump right in. Oakley Carlson was born on December 6, 2016, to Jordan Bowers, Oakley's mom, and Andrew Carlson, Oakley's dad. When I refer to Jordan and Andrew as Oakley's mom and dad, I am using the term very lightly, and it honestly kills me to even say it. Jordan and Andrew are an absolute shit show, and the reason that people should be tested prior to having children, and unfortunately, Jordan and Andrew have 4 children combined. Oakley is one of 4 siblings. She had an older sister and an older half-brother, and then she would eventually have a younger brother as well. Jordan and Andrew were both born and raised in Grays Harbor and met when Andrew was an Aberdeen police officer. Andrew was an officer for about 2 years, but he ended up losing his badge and commission in 2017 for making false and misleading reports. When Andrew was fired, he was placed on the Brady List, which is a list containing the names and details of law enforcement officers who have sustained incidents of untruthfulness, criminal convictions, candor issues, or some other type of issue, placing their credibility into question. Needless to say, Andrew will never be a police officer again. The family lived on a 300-acre property in Oakville, which is an extremely small town. I believe the population is about 730 people, so if you were to pass through this town and blink, you would miss it. The relationship between Andrew and Jordan has been described as very volatile, aggressive, and tumultuous. It was a relationship fueled by drugs, and both Jordan and Andrew's drug of choice was methamphetamine. Despite this, Andrew is reportedly the more responsible one because he often took care of the kids while Jordan was out feeding her gambling addiction and doing drugs. Obviously, we have set our parenting standards real high on this one. By 2017, the behavior and drug use caused Jordan and Andrew to lose custody of all of their kids. Jordan and Andrew were caught neglecting to give necessary medical care to Oakley's older sister, who has a disability. And without her medication and health care, she could suffer health-wise, or it could even lead to death. Oakley also had some developmental delays. I would assume that this may be due to drug use during her pregnancy, but I do not know that for sure. All of the kids were removed from the home and placed into foster care. On September 22, 2017, Oakley, at 7 months old, was sent to live with her foster parents Jamie Jo and Eric Hiles. Jamie Jo and Eric are the reason that I went through and redid my video because I want to tell you a little bit about these two and the life they were able to provide for Oakley. Jamie Jo and Eric were high school sweethearts, and the love they share is apparent, especially on Jamie Jo's TikTok page, which I full-on stalked during this case because I just love them.
I can't wait to get out of hell. I see you like a movie.
How do you feel about what's to happen, Eric?
I don't know.
This is your man.
Yes.
Look at the screen.
That's mine. I'm gonna stick beside him.
And that's what you're going to settle for.
I'm gonna stick beside him.
This is your man.
We see those dance moves, Eric. Jamie Jo and Eric are both teachers at the high school they fell in love in, and they teach in classrooms that are right next to each other. Jamie Jo and Eric were having trouble conceiving a child, and one of Jamie Jo's former students knew this. She knew how badly Jamie Jo and Eric wanted to be parents, and she texted Jamie Jo in August of 2017, and she asked if they would like to foster her hairdresser's grandchild, who needed a home and who would probably be up for adoption. They didn't know what the future would hold, but they both felt this was the right thing. Jamie Jo looked at Eric and said, "I feel really right about this." And Eric said, "Okay, let's do it." And that is what they did. Both Eric and Jamie Jo have described getting a feeling that this was just right, like they were meant to be Oakley's mom and dad, and they could not have been more right. Through this video, I am going to refer to Jamie Jo and Eric as Oakley's foster parents, but I want to be clear that these two are Oakley's mom and dad in every sense of the word. The only beautiful thing about this story is the love that was shared between Eric, Jamie Jo, and Oakley. These two absolutely loved this little girl, and sometimes we go through these cases and we wonder if the child in the situation ever felt loved, but in this case, Oakley was and is loved beyond words. When the Hiles talk about Oakley and they can forget the trauma for a moment, their faces light up. Jamie Jo and Eric describe Oakley as a bright light and a loving little girl who absolutely loved affection. Eric talks about how if Oakley was watching a movie on the couch, she didn't want to be alone or sitting far away. She wanted to be snuggled up close with them. They said Oakley did not know a stranger. She loved hanging out with the dance squad that Jamie Jo coached, and she would get in there and talk and stretch with the team. She knew all the moves, just like she was one of them. Jamie Jo said that Oakley had enough empathy for others that it was unmatched, even at her very young age. Jamie Jo told a story about how Oakley was watching the movie WALL-E about a robot, and when she saw that WALL-E was lonely and had no friends, she became very emotional until she saw that WALL-E met Eve, another robot, who became his friend. She said that Oakley was her little empath. She could always tell if Jamie Jo had a day, and she would just walk over, put her little hand on Jamie Jo's shoulder, and say, "It's okay, Mama. Everything is okay." Oakley loved her books and always wanted to read at least 4 to 5 books a night, and each night she would want her books in bed with her instead of any stuffed animals. Eric talks about how she was always trying to get everyone to smile or laugh, and if she got you to laugh, she would work on getting you to laugh harder. When the Hiles began to foster Oakley, it was under the condition that Oakley would be reunited with Jordan and Andrew. There are 2 types of fostering. One is where you foster, and the system works on reunification with your biological parents, and the other is when you foster into adoption. So, the Hiles, for the first year that they had Oakley, were under the impression that, eventually, Oakley would go home with Jordan and Andrew. The plan was for Jordan and Andrew to get clean, make lifestyle changes, and make the home a place that was safe for all involved, something that should be enforced for anyone to have custody of their children. However, Jordan and Andrew, being the stellar parents that they are, struggled to meet the requirements in place so that Oakley and her siblings could come home, And after a year, in July of 2018, the case was changed by DCYF into a foster to adoption case, and that meant that Jamie Jo and Eric would be able to adopt Oakley. They were beyond excited when this happened. They knew in their hearts that Oakley was their daughter. Oakley had already told them that she wanted to be with them forever. Oakley loved and trusted Jamie Jo and Eric, and let me add here that Jamie Jo and Eric never talked badly about Jordan and Andrew to Oakley. When you foster, this is one of the very clear rules, and Jamie Jo and Eric have always been very clear that they never disrespected Andrew and Jordan in that manner. When the Hiles talked about the difference between a foster mom and her biological mom with Oakley, they always told her that she didn't come from Jamie Jo's tummy, and instead, she came from her heart. When the Hiles got the news that they could adopt Oakley, they couldn't wait to give her the love, home, and family that she deserved. One of the major concerns leaving Oakley in a home with her biological parents was drug use and domestic violence. Neighbors have stated that they had to call the police on Jordan and Andrew numerous times, and in July of 2018, Andrew was arrested for domestic violence. He was charged with assault 4 after attacking Jordan. For those who don't know, assault 4 is intentionally or recklessly causing physical harm to another, or, because of criminal negligence, causing physical injury to another with a deadly or dangerous weapon. In Washington, this is a gross misdemeanor. When this happened, Andrew was court-ordered on November 14, 2018, to obtain a domestic violence evaluation and go through a domestic violence program. Within 90 days of release and staying true to habit, he did not accomplish this. He started the program, but he was eventually kicked out for not coming to the meetings. When this happened, DCYF received notification that Andrew had failed to attend the necessary classes, and he would now have to pay a fee to be reinstated if he wanted to finish the program. DCYF knew that Andrew had not met the court-ordered requirements for assault 4, but this is just one of the many things DCYF overlooked in this case.
You binoculars. Ooh, you little explorer?
Despite the change in status from reunification to up to adoption, Jordan and Andrew were still, for some reason, given supervised visits with Oakley, and during these visits there should have been a DCYF worker there at all times who would aid in caring for Oakley and supervise, and unfortunately, DCYF was neglectful in doing this. In March of 2019, Oakley had a supervised visit with Jordan and Andrew, and during the 2 hours visit, her diaper had not been changed one time, and she returned home with scratches on her face. When Jamie Jo contacted the DCYF worker who was there and asked what had happened to Oakley's face, they were unable to give Jamie Jo a reason. On March 26, 2019, Jamie Jo emailed her caseworker, Angela Fries. She included a visitation log with the incident included in the log, and when Angela Fries emailed Jamie Jo back, she completely ignored the topic, and unfortunately, this is a pattern in this case where things that should be very important, considering that this is about the life of a child, would be completely ignored. You can see in the photo that Oakley had several scratches, and then the response from Angela Fries that blatantly ignores the issue. I just want to also make something clear here. I name names for accountability. I know some channels do not do this, but that doesn't help when you have a group of people who have had no accountability. And if I can give them just a little bit of accountability by naming them, then I will do that, and I will stand behind it. You will understand more when we get more into this story, but if a social worker fails to do their job and a child gets hurt, goes missing, or they lose their life, despite the warning signs, I think that those social workers should absolutely be held accountable, and this is something I want to fight to change. We have lost too many children after Child Protective Services puts that child back into the arms of their abusers, who are monsters. This is something I am very passionate about. We see these cases all the time, where kids' parents are abusive and neglectful, and the child is placed into a foster home where they are safe and loved. Then, despite the warning signs like violence, criminal behavior, drug use, abuse, anger issues, CPS and/or DCYF will ignore all of it. return the child to the home they were never safe in, and then that child goes missing or dies. We have to work together to ensure that no more innocent children lose their lives, despite warning sign after warning sign, because the state is more interested in reunification numbers than the child's safety. The Hiles were unfortunately blindsided on September 30th, 2019, when the worst thing imaginable happened and someone changed Oakley's case from up for adoption to reunification with her parents. The reunification was scheduled for January of 2020, which was only 4 months away at that time. There's not a lot of information on why this change happened, and especially after the Hiles having Oakley for so long, but one of the agency's strategic priorities is to reduce the number of children and youth in out-of-home care in half. They prioritized the reunification process, and in this case, they prioritized wanting reunification over the well-being and safety of a child. In October of 2019, Jamie, Joe, and Eric sat down to have a meeting with DCYF caseworker Angela Fries and her supervisor Catherine Eddy to express their deep concerns regarding Oakley and how fast the reunification process was going. When they expressed that they were very concerned, Jamie, Joe, and Eric were told that Oakley was not their daughter. When they asked how the biological parents could care for Oakley without jobs, they were told that being poor does not mean that they are unable to parent. Despite them fighting to be heard, the reunification process began, and with that, Andrew and Jordan were granted unsupervised visits with Oakley.
So, for some context, in about June of 2019, we had been asked by the social worker if we would be interested in possibly taking Oakley's younger sibling once he was born.
Mhm.
And we were like, yes, definitely. And that all kind of came crashing down in about a month. We don't know a lot about what happened because we're the foster parents and you don't get a lot of that information. But at the very beginning of Oakley and her siblings going into foster care, the social worker didn't do something that she was supposed to do. Like, she was supposed to take the stand, or she was supposed to present something.
Yeah, there was, at a hearing, she didn't give evidence or give testimony or something like that. I'm not sure of the details.
Oakley's biological mom, Jordan, contested that. It went to 2 different courts, and she ended up winning, which that meant that everything in foster care was basically negated. And even though she'd spent over 500 days with us, the courts now saw it as she had entered foster care as day 1. So it reset the clock on everything. So July of 2019, we get a call from our CASA. Now, your CASA is a court-appointed special advocate, and they are supposed to be the person that kind of fights for your child in court and says, this is what should be going on to the judge. We met ours twice.
I think he came to the house, only twice.
Yeah, if that. And we saw him at court a couple times, but definitely not somebody to be fighting on Oakley's behalf, because I don't think he really knew anything about her.
No.
And so anyways, he called me in July of 2019, and I know exactly where I was when he called, and he said, well, you did the best that you could. Maybe next time just don't get so attached. And that was pretty much the consistency of our phone call, unfortunately. Yeah. So when October rolled around, our social worker told us, Oakley's going to start transitioning home. Eric and I went down to Grays Harbor, and we had a meeting with the social worker and her supervisor. And basically, I pulled up this whole list of all of Jordan and Andrew's arrest records, faults as parents. We brought up that where are they going to go? They don't have a house. They don't have jobs.
They didn't have a job. And the social worker said poverty is not a barrier to having children. But it wasn't obviously not a barrier to reunite her. They didn't have to have a job. They didn't have to.
Right. And we understand. We're not saying that being in poverty or being homeless is a reason to lose your children. But what we are saying is it doesn't make any sense to take a child out of that and put them into a bad place. And that's where we were very confused. And we left that meeting with just being told, she's not your daughter. And that was really hurtful to us. But what was even more hurtful is we were given the timeline that January 2020 is what we were looking at.
So we're going to do it after the holidays.
After the holidays. But then all of a sudden, it was November. Very quick. Now, Oakley had never spent the night with her parents. So all of a sudden, she was having full weekend visits with her parents, unsupervised visits with them. And then before she returned home with them in 2019, she had 2 weekends where she'd spent the night with them permanently. That's a lot of change for a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old. And I can't explain how, if that was like really hard for us, I can't imagine what it felt like for Oakley. And she had come home several times and told us that she was there for too long, that she wanted to come home.
Yeah.
And what do you say back to that?
On October 26th of 2019, Oakley came home from one of the unsupervised visits with Jordan and Andrew, and she told the Hiles that she had Andrew's phone and had witnessed violence happen between Andrew and Jordan. Jamie Jo took this video as little Oakley tried to explain to Eric and Jamie Jo what had happened.
Look, trying to take a phone from me.
Oh, and so
And he took his phone from you?
Yeah.
Did you have Andrew's phone?
Yeah. I was watching Coco Melon
Okay.
and then you take it.
and then
Okay.
what happened?
And Jordan put him back in his bed.
And then Jordan put Andrew back in his bed?
Yeah.
Oh.
Did she hit him, Oakley?
Yeah. Him dead, like really hard, like
Jordan.
Or why did she hit him?
cause him was being mean.
Why was he being mean?
Like, whoa.
Jamie Jo emailed Angela Fries with her concerns after this and was told that there were no concerns and that Oakley loved her mom and dad.
The big bad wolf's like, well, I'm gonna huff, and I'm gonna puff, and I'm gonna.
And have things go
It
down.
didn't blow down. So the big bad wolf got really mad, and he huffed, and he puffed again, and
And have things go down.
no, it didn't blow down.
Like,
So he's like, what can I do? So he's like, I'm gonna climb down the chimney. So he climbs up on top of the roof. And he goes down the chimney, and he gets all the way to the bottom, and he falls into the fire, burns his tail, and runs away, never to be seen again.
why?
Because he got burned and ran away.
Why?
Because the piggy scared him away.
Like, you never catch us.
2 weeks later, on November 6th of 2019, Jamie Jo wrote caseworker Angela Fries and supervisor Catherine Eddy to state that she had heard the overnight visits were going to be starting soon and that she was deeply concerned due to the domestic violence issue between Jordan and Andrew, the fact Andrew had never finished court-ordered domestic violence classes, and that she felt things were moving way too quickly. This is a very valid complaint. DCYF could have slowed this process down, but instead, DCYF decided to speed it up, and Angela Fries responded by letting Jamie Jo know that they had decided to move the reunification date up, and it would happen on November 29th, 2019. It sounds to me like Jamie Jo was so on top of it and so detail-orientated and so determined to fight to keep Oakley safe that DCYF got annoyed and just wanted to get it over with so they could wipe their hands of it, be done, and not have to deal with Jamie Jo. They should have taken a step back, realized that Jordan and Andrew had a history, and taken the time to investigate the complaints of someone who had done nothing but love Oakley, keep her safe, and provide a home for her. In the beginning of this, I told you that Oakley was born with developmental delays, but you could not see them, and I believe this is absolutely due to Eric and Jamie Jo. While all of this was going on, Andrew was still dealing with the courts for his assault 4 charge, and on November 13th of 2019, the charges were dismissed. Something I will never understand is why we give so much leniency to people who physically harm another human with physical violence, and why we give children back to people who have assaulted someone in their own home. It really shows that even with someone they love, they are unable to contain or manage their anger. Andrew did not even bother to finish the court-ordered domestic violence classes that were required. The prosecution urged the judge to hold Andrew accountable as he had not met the court requirements, but the judge still dropped the charges. On November 17 of 2019, Eric Hiles wrote caseworker Angela Fries and supervisor Catherine Eddy to ask about Oakley's transition to her biological parents and why it was happening so quickly, and the two never gave Eric a response. On November 29th of 2019, per the orders given by DCYF, Oakley was put back into her biological parents' care, and this is how Jamie Jo describes that moment because I can't do justice to it. This is the part of this case that replays for me because Jamie Jo and Eric fought so hard to keep Oakley safe, and they both, again, had a feeling that this was not going to go well.
She literally spent the night 3 times at her parents' house before she went back permanently.
I feel everything was incredibly rushed.
Her last day with us was a Friday, and the driver came and picked her up at 10 a.m. We knew it was final, and we knew that we wouldn't get to talk to her after she returned to her biological parents.
We gave her a big hug. We put her in the car. We buckled her in, gave her another hug and kiss goodbye.
There's this really great show called Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and there's a really great lesson where they sing a song about grown-ups coming back. She looked at me and she told me that it's okay, grown-ups come back, and she tried to console me.
Later that day, we were walking upstairs past her bedroom, and I just closed the door. We closed that door for 6-8 months.
That's hard to even explain to somebody because it really did feel like a death.
Through this, there were several major things that everyone turned a blind eye to, and so many missed chances to keep Oakley safe and in a home where she was loved. There were stipulations that Jordan and Andrew should have been held to regain custody of Oakley and her siblings, and one of those things was passing drug tests. Jordan admittedly told her social worker that it didn't matter if she had to do drug tests because she knew how to cheat the system. Jordan's drug test came back ineligible, and there was never a legible result provided. CPS also reported at this time that they were unable to determine if Andrew was doing drugs in the home or around the kids, which he had done in the past, because they never received any drug tests from him. Jordan was also assessed for domestic violence on 2 separate occasions, and the first one they recommended that Jordan attend 1 year of domestic violence treatment. Due to this, Jordan had another assessment done that concluded no further services were necessary, but it was found that during this assessment, Jordan was not honest. She had already taken the first one, and she knew what it entailed, and so she knew how to cheat the system, and this is who Jordan is. She is a con artist. There were concerns when it came to Oakley's older disabled sister, and that there were more missed appointments for her necessary medical care. This was one of the reasons the kids were removed from the home, despite Jordan and Andrew receiving a gas card to get her to her appointments. Oakley's sister's medication was last filled in August of 2020, and the last time Oakley's sister was given her medication was noted between September and December of 2020. So now you have Jordan, who is not doing what was deemed necessary for her to get her children back. She never passed a drug test. Her domestic violence tests contradicted each other. Andrew was arrested for assault and did not finish his court-ordered domestic violence classes. There is a history of drugs and legal issues. They continued to neglect to care for Oakley's older sister, putting her life in danger, and nobody ever bothered to check to see if the home was a safe place for Oakley and her siblings to return home to. And we now know it was absolutely not. But according to DCYF worker Angela Fries, there were no issues, and Oakley loved her mom and dad. On June 3rd of 2020, DCYF closed Oakley's case, and DCYF worker and Oakley's caseworker Angela Fries signed the paperwork. They never bothered to follow up with the transition to ensure that 4 children were safe in the home they took them out of. How DCYF expected change when no effort was made in making sure this home was safe is beyond me.
What's your name?
In December of 2020, Oakley spent the night with her grandma, which would be Andrew's mom. When this happened, Grandma noticed that Oakley did not look well. She had circles under her eyes. It even appeared that she had a black eye. Her skin was gaunt and pale, and she had sores and scratches on her face, and she looked malnourished, and the grandma took a photo of Oakley to keep record of her injuries. This is another person who could have stepped in and made sure Oakley was safe, but all she did was take a photo to document the injuries and how Oakley looked. It honestly just makes me sick. About a month later, that photo was shared with Jamie Jo by an associate of the family. Jamie Jo agreed that Oakley did not look well, and she had also heard that Andrew had been fired from his job at Murphy Veneer in Elma, Washington, for drug use. Jamie Jo begged Andrew's mom to call CPS, and Andrew's mom refused because she stated that they had to walk a fine line if they wanted to see their grandchildren. Obviously, that worked really well. Jamie Jo couldn't not say something, so she went to the Elma police chief, the jurisdiction that Andrew worked in, as a mandatory reporter, as a teacher, and Oakley's foster mom, and she was told that they could not do anything because they were out of jurisdiction, and that Jamie Jo should call DCYF and they could send a sheriff out to do a wellness check on Oakley. Jamie Jo called DCYF and she talked to an intake worker, Morgan Artis, who spoke very sternly with Jamie Jo. He didn't take her complaint seriously, and instead, he lectured Jamie Jo on how she could get in trouble if she continued to make false allegations, and if she did not see the abuse herself, then they would assume the reports were false, and there was nothing they could do about it. Jamie Jo reiterated that she was a mandatory reporter and that she was very concerned about Oakley. Jamie Jo also reported that Andrew was doing drugs, and she was told that parents are allowed to do drugs, but they just can't do them in front of the children. The only good thing that came out of this was that CPS did go and check on the kids on January 27th of 2021, and they did see Oakley, but nothing came out of this visit. Unfortunately, the details on this visit are not accessible since it is an ongoing case, but I am going to bet that there were indications that something more was going on, especially with some of the stuff that came out later. And once again, they failed at another chance of getting these kids out of an unsafe home.
After Oakley returned, we didn't really hear anything. I feel like it was kind of radio silence for months.
Yeah.
We had no visits with her. We didn't want to confuse Oakley by popping in and out of her life. So we had no contact with her after she left us on November 29th, 2019. But we did kind of hear from family members that Oakley she was like a problem child, that she wasn't nice to her siblings, that she was just naughty, which I think was kind of shocking for us because
so I don't think she wasn't that way when she was in our care, for sure.
No, definitely not. That was kind of disappointing to hear that she was a problem child because I just didn't ever see her in that light. It was very concerning to us because a couple months after Oakley returned, COVID happened, and we didn't know if, were they being supervised at all, which they weren't. We now know that Washington DCYF has said that they weren't able to do visits because of the virus, which I think we both think is total BS because as teachers, we still had to do things. We both were out handing out graduation materials to students. We were making sure that things were happening in the education world. And that's really disheartening that an agency that's supposed to protect children
basically just
dropped the ball.
Yeah, they just said, no, we're not going to do it.
Yeah. And so in December 2020, Oakley went and visited her grandparents, and I saw a picture. And I'd also heard rumors that Andrew had been fired from his job for using methamphetamine again. So I saw this photo of Oakley. She didn't look good. She looked very gaunt. She looked sickly, and I waited for the grandparents to call it in. I honestly thought, okay, I'll wait. I didn't hear anything. So I reached out to our local police chief, and she said, I can't really do anything because Oakville's out of my jurisdiction, but you're a mandated reporter, so I'm going to go ahead and suggest that you call. So I called CPS. I was pretty much just chided right away for calling. I
can remember the gentleman saying that, you can get in trouble for making a false accusation. And Jamie definitely reminded the telephone operator that she's like, I'm a mandated reporter. I know what I have to do. And he just still,
it was, you heard this from somebody who heard this from somebody. Why isn't the concerned grandparent calling? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for why nobody would call about a child that looks sickly or abused. So I felt like I wasn't really taking that seriously. But I also brought up that, okay, Andrew was reportedly fired for using drugs. And they said that parents can use drugs. They just can't hurt their children with them. That's when CPS starts to become involved.
On March 24, 2021, DCYF called Jamie Jo, and they asked her if she had seen Oakley or Oakley's older sister. Jamie Jo, of course, said she had not, and informed DCYF that they were no longer involved with the family. DCYF never gave her a reason on why they were calling, and at the end of March, all of the complaints in the system pertaining to Oakley's case were closed again without DCYF putting eyes on Oakley. However, the story does not end here, and it only gets worse. 2 years after Jamie Jo and Eric gave Oakley back to Jordan and Andrew on November 6, 2021 at 4:54 p.m., Andrew called 911 to report a fire that had started at 10 a.m., but he tells dispatch that he doesn't need anyone to come and help because he had put the fire out himself and that his daughter, Oakley, had accidentally lit the couch on fire. He said the only reason that he was calling was for insurance purposes. Andrew did not name Oakley by name, but he did tell dispatch that his 4-year-old, which was Oakley's age at the time, lit the couch on fire with a cigarette lighter. That alone should have raised flags for many reasons. How many 4-year-olds do you know that know how to light a lighter? Why would a child have access to a lighter? Why is a 4-year-old being left unattended long enough that they can light a couch on fire? Obviously, there is something not right. And that report by Andrew to 911 should have been enough for someone to go out and check on the situation. You can see from the photos that this is not a small fire. This isn't just a couch being lit on fire and it being put out quickly. This is a serious fire. It did a lot of damage, and it is very concerning that 911 was never called during this. Later, the fire marshal determined that this was not caused by a fire on the couch, and instead, the fire started in the microwave. I can't help but speculate about this. I really wonder what exactly 2 drug users were trying to cook in the microwave that would cause their home to go up in flames. Was it intentional? Were they covering something up? Jordan later told a friend, shocking that she has one, that they battled the fire for 4 hours. I am sorry, but you know that there is something not right in that house when 2 people tried to fight a fire for 4 hours instead of calling 911. There are so many unanswered questions regarding this fire that remain unresolved. On November 10th of 2021, the principal of Oakville Elementary School, Jessica Swift, went to deliver some supplies to Jordan and Andrew. Jessica's daughter is also a friend of Oakley's older sister, and when she was visiting, she asked where Oakley was, and she was told that Oakley was in her room for being naughty, and that she wouldn't want to see Oakley anyways. Jessica was at the residence for about 45 minutes. She never saw or heard Oakley, but she didn't really think anything of it at that time. On November 17th of 2021, there was a GoFundMe posted for Jordan and Andrew. A friend made the GoFundMe on Jordan and Andrew's behalf, and when Jamie Jo saw the GoFundMe, something hit her again that there was something going on that just was not right. In the GoFundMe, it was stated that Jordan and Andrew had fought the fire for 4 hours and that they did not call 911 because they could not find their phones. Jamie Jo wrote her caseworker, Angela Fries, and her supervisor, Catherine Eddy, one day after she saw the GoFundMe, and she told them about the fire and the GoFundMe. She was concerned that the kids were living in the home after a fire with all of the fumes. She had a feeling the children were not safe, and she was deeply concerned. I am going to read you guys the entire email because I think it is necessary. Hello, my name is Jamie Jo Hiles, and I am writing in concern for Oakley Carlson and her siblings. Oakley was my foster daughter from September 2017 to November 2019, until she was abruptly returned to her biological parents, Andrew Carlson and Jordan Bowers, following the birth of her little brother. There were many times as a foster parent that I questioned the ethics and morals of CPS and DCYF, if their motives for reunification were truly for the right reasons. Oakley's grandparents enable their children and will not report the abuse that happens in the home. In hopes that someone else will, I called CPS in January of 2021 upon suggestion from the Elma police chief and was essentially told that because I did not witness it firsthand that my information is inaccurate, even though I'm a mandatory reporter to the state since I work in education. Most recently, the house where Oakley lives with her biological parents caught fire. The upstairs caught fire, and the parents couldn't find their phones to call 911, so instead, they fought the fire themselves for hours per the GoFundMe, and then didn't report the fire for 2 weeks. While I am not an investigator, I find this very odd and very dangerous behavior to those children who could have died in that fire. I am writing to you to document that if something is to happen to these children, and I have tried multiple times to help them, that CPS and DCYF are at fault and will not only be in huge legal trouble, but the public relations fallout of not protecting those children will be massive. Massive is in all caps. I will be putting in yet another phone call to CPS this afternoon to demand that this fire be inspected by police CPS. I am attaching the GoFundMe made for the biological parents of Oakley, as well as screenshots of a conversation with the grandmother where she states the things that happen in the home from March of this year. If you would like to contact me in regards to this email, I am available at 3:30 p.m. at blank. Please do your due diligence and inspect this, regardless if I am to get a response back or not. Those children deserve it. This is a pivotal moment in this case. You can feel the desperation to keep those kids safe, and in this moment, I think the Hiles knew something bad had happened. It's a mom's intuition when we know deep down something has happened, and it's so unfortunate that this feeling was right. But I don't think that Jamie Jo or Eric could ever imagine the reality of what was to come. On November 19, 2021, Jamie Jo called Washington DCYF to report the fire after receiving no reply from caseworker Angela Fries and supervisor Catherine Eddy. The frustration the Hiles had to be feeling at this point is insurmountable. On November 24th of 2021, Jessica Swift went back over to Jordan and Andrews to drop off more supplies, and again she saw everyone but Oakley. Jessica brought this up to a friend and coworker who also found it odd, and they happened to be going over to the house to drop off a donated meal the following day. Jessica told her to get eyes on Oakley, so the friend went over, and she also did not see Oakley while she was there, so she immediately called Jessica to let her know. On December 5th of 2021, Jessica Swift called the Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office to tell them a very chilling story. Jessica told the Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office about the times that she had been to Andrew and Jordan's and not seen Oakley. On December 4th of 2021, Jessica invited Oakley's older sister over to do a sleepover with her daughter. The two girls were friends, so this was not anything out of ordinary. When Jessica asked Oakley's sister where Oakley was, she said, "Oakley is no more." At this point, Oakley's sister got extremely emotional and upset. So Jessica decided not to push it, but she describes just getting this sinking feeling. The following day, Jessica called Jordan to see if Oakley's sister could spend the night one more night, and Jordan agreed. This time, Jessica asked Oakley's sister if Oakley still lived with them, and Oakley's sister told her no, that Oakley had gone to live with her foster parents. That would be Jamie Jo and Eric, who definitely did not have Oakley. Jessica knew something was not right, and so she asked police to do a welfare check on Oakley. After police got the request, and this is still on December 6th, which also happens to be Oakley's 5th birthday, they found out that Jordan and Andrew were now staying at an extended stay hotel in Tumwater, and arranged for the Tumwater police to do a welfare check on Oakley. At around 10 a.m., the Tumwater police went to the Tumwater Hotel to do a welfare check on Oakley, and when they knocked on the door, it was answered by Jordan with her 2-year-old, Oakley's little brother, in her arms, and police noted that the little boy was dressed well, he looked healthy, and the portion of the room that they could see was clean, so they asked Jordan where Oakley was, and Jordan replied saying, "Oakley is with her mom." Knowing that Jordan was Oakley's mom, they asked her, "Aren't you Oakley's mom?" And Jordan replied that she was. Confused, the officer asked her where Oakley was again and reported Jordan looked into the room. They couldn't see who she was looking at and asked, "Isn't Oakley with your mom and dad?" Then Andrew came to the door and they ask him where Oakley is, and at first he says absolutely nothing in response. So they ask him again and he says that Oakley is with his dad, but that he does not have his dad's address or phone number. The police then kind of pressed him because how can you have your child with someone and not have their address or phone number? Both Jordan and Andrew were confused on which one of them took Oakley to the grandparents' house, and this also raised red flags, so they continued to press for Andrew's dad's information. So Andrew then finds the phone number and address and gives it to police, and it turned out that Jordan and Andrew were basically neighbors with the grandparents. They lived very close. The police call Andrew's dad, and this is when they are informed that Andrew's dad, Oakley's grandpa, had not seen or heard from Oakley in over a year. They live literally right by Jordan and Andrew and did not find it odd that they had not seen their grandchild in over a year, and this is after seeing Oakley at Christmas, which was the last time they saw her and where they took a photo of her because she looked malnourished and abused. Police then called DCYF to make sure that Oakley was not with Jamie Jo and Eric. Oakley was not even in the foster care system at this point. This meant that nobody knew where Oakley was. Around noon of that day, Jordan did a factory reset on her phone, only a few hours after the Tumwater police visited the hotel, and that alone is like waving a big red flag in the air with the words guilty on it. And the only reason someone would do this is if they have something on that phone that they do not want found. It immediately makes you guilty of something, but it doesn't surprise me that Jordan did this, given Jordan is guilty of a lot of things, none of which.
Just me and Jordan. Ma, I'm reading to you.
You are reading to me.
Okay.
Be gentle with it.
Okay. Just me and you. Honey, bees.
Mm-hmm.
While all of this was going on, DCYF called Jamie Jo. Jamie Jo was at work, and she had been going through old pictures of Oakley to post on social media because it was Oakley's birthday, which made her a little emotional. A couple of hours later, Jamie Jo was in the principal's office to go through observations, and she just burst into tears. The principal was new at the time, so Jamie Jo explained that she fostered Oakley, and it was her birthday, so she was just missing her a lot. While Jamie Jo was in the office, her phone was going off, and she just assumed it was parents asking about the dance team banquet that evening. When Jamie Jo looked at her phone, she realized it was the Gray Harbor Sheriff's Office and Washington, DCYF. Jamie Jo listened to her messages, and the first one, from DCYF, was asking if they could take Oakley's younger brother and Oakley once they found her, and the second was the sheriff's office, asking if the Hiles had seen Oakley, to which they, of course, replied no. Jamie Jo ran into Eric's classroom, and they were just so excited and jumping up and down, and all the kids in the hallway of the school were celebrating because Oakley was coming home. Jamie Jo even called her dad and told him to sit down so she could break the news, and he was also super excited. They could not wait to finally bring their daughter home. Police then returned to the Tumwater Hotel and tell Jordan and Andrew that Oakley is not with Andrew's parents, and they stated that Andrew's response was absolute indifference, complete lack of care for the fact that nobody knew where his child was. He was visibly angry and told them that he was not going to answer any more of their questions. When they asked Jordan, she became absolutely furious, balling her fists, outraged as she yelled that she was not going to be answering any more of their questions either. The door was then slammed shut in the police's face, and this is when the investigation into the disappearance of Oakley Carlson began. As the police left the Tumwater Hotel, they noticed that in Jordan and Andrew's vehicle, there was only one car seat, despite the couple having 4 children, including Oakley, between the ages of 2 and 9. Something I found interesting was in the GoFundMe, it states only 3 children were home at the time of the fire, but they asked for items for all 4 children. What we do know is investigators do not think Oakley was still around when the fire happened. At 2:06 p.m., Jordan called the elementary school, where Jessica Swift was principal, and told her that an emergency had happened and that they were coming to grab their 6-year-old daughter and to make sure that she was ready. Clearly, Jordan does not have her true crime PhD because she has all the red flags raised and waving. Jessica Swift called the police to report that the couple was on the way to pick up their other daughter and was given the instruction to not release the little girl to her parents, but Jordan and Andrew never showed up. Andrew then calls the police on their non-emergency line to report Oakley missing. Being the genius that he is, Andrew told dispatch that he had not seen Oakley since November 30th, 2021, but it was later found that Oakley had not been seen since February of 2021, which really gives you a huge gap in this story of when Oakley was last seen and when Jordan and Andrew claimed to have last seen Oakley. It is just so crazy to me that in the midst of this chaos, Andrew thought it would be the right move to report Oakley missing. Like, no shit, I am pretty sure they know that, considering they just talked to you. At 3:31 p.m., Jordan and Andrew left the hotel and officers followed them to their home. Jordan was arrested at the home for obstructing a police officer and suspicion of first-degree manslaughter, and Andrew was taken into custody for questioning and was arrested a little later in the day for first-degree manslaughter charges. At some point in this chaos, Andrew made the comment that Oakley would not be coming home anytime soon and nobody would be reuniting with her. Once Jordan and Andrew were arrested on suspicion of manslaughter, detectives had a 72-hour window to file charges on them for manslaughter, and they ended up not having enough evidence to do so. However, they were able to hold them on other charges. At this point, nobody has told Jamie Jo and Eric that Oakley was missing. They just assumed that Oakley was with a relative, and they just had not tracked her down yet. DCYF had told them absolutely nothing. It's really nice that the only time DCYF communicated with Eric and Jamie Jo is when they needed something out of them. Oakley's brother was dropped off, and Eric describes him being dirty from head to toe, like he had just rolled around in dirt, with Monsters, Inc. pajamas and rubber boots on. They said nobody got sleep that night, and the following day they went to Target to get Oakley's brother some clothes since he had none and some other items for him and Oakley. They were in the toy aisle when Jamie Jo got a call from a friend who asked if she had seen that Jordan and Andrew had been arrested for manslaughter charges, and Jamie Jo describes thinking no wonder that they needed to foster Oakley and her brother if they had unalived someone, and then the friend told them that it was actually Oakley. Jamie Jo ran out of Target and threw up. Jamie Jo called Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office, and she was told it was just a holding period, but that they thought Oakley was no longer here. DCYF to this day has never called Jamie Jo to tell her Oakley is missing or declared her missing. The last text Jamie Jo has with the social worker is her asking if Oakley would be okay in a queen-sized bed, and the social worker replying, "We will cross that bridge when we get there." It is just appalling how DCYF handled this case. They knew their guilt. They knew that they played a sufficient role in this little girl's disappearance, and while you may be able to hide behind unethical politicians, you can't escape accountability with someone who fought to hold them accountable on many, many occasions. And I believe this is why they never bothered to call Jamie Jo and Eric to update them. They knew they did not do enough, and they were avoiding telling the two people who warned them repeatedly, who told them the children were not safe in that home, because they now knew that Eric and Jamie Jo were correct, that they had failed the kids in this home, and that there was now a child who was no longer alive because of it. They knew that they were at fault, so they avoided the person they knew would hold them accountable for their failure in protecting Oakley. Police went immediately to work on finding Oakley. When police interviewed Oakley's 6-year-old sister, she initially said that she did not have a sister, but later she said that Oakley was her sister, but she had not seen her in a long time. When asked directly about Oakley, she paused for almost a minute before she told the officer that her mom did not want her to talk about Oakley and that Oakley had gone outside and been eaten by wolves. Imagine the trauma that poor girl went through believing that Oakley had gone into the woods and been eaten by wolves. When police asked if she knew if Oakley had been hurt, she broke down and cried, but didn't offer any more information. When police interviewed Oakley's brother, he said that Oakley had been locked in a closet under the stairs, that he had witnessed Jordan beating Oakley with a belt, and that he had been afraid that Oakley was going to starve to death. On December 9th of 2021, the Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office announced that Jordan and Andrew were now facing charges of abandonment of a dependent person in the 2nd degree. after investigators discovered evidence the parents had not been providing medication prescribed to Oakley's older sister, knowing that without the medication, she is at risk of physical impairment that could lead to death. Do I sound like I am repeating myself? I am. This was the reason that the kids were removed from the house in the first place. They did not just skip her medical care and medication for a couple of weeks, and instead, it was for 15 months. You would think that if this was one of the main reasons that these children were taken from this home, that DCYF would, I don't know, make sure that the little girl was getting her necessary medical care and medications when they were reunited, but they were too busy doing the bare minimum. At this point, both Andrew and Jordan are no longer held on manslaughter charges due to insufficient evidence, but they are held on other charges. The search for Oakley was started right away, starting with an extensive search of the property. Inside the home, detectives found bedrooms, clothes, and toys for each child except for Oakley. Detectives also found blood on the blinds near the front door and on the wall in the downstairs hallway. A lot of people have stated that this could have been Oakley's blood and that the blood was splattered from a violent attack, but this blood was found to be Andrew's and not Oakley's. On December 10th of 2021, DCYF took hair follicle samples of Oakley's older sister and her younger brother, who was 2 at the time, and this showed that both kids had very high levels of methamphetamine in their systems. Oakley's younger brother's test result was so high that they believe he ingested it himself. All this test could tell them was that within the past 3 months, the kids had been exposed to methamphetamine. Now look at Jordan and Andrew's mugshots. Let's count the ways you would be able to tell that they were on drugs simply by looking at them. It is literally all over their faces. But nobody from DCYF apparently cared enough to look at these two and realize that, true to their nature, they were still doing drugs. The other main reason that these kids were removed from this home, and in addition to the fact that neither of them ever had to follow up with an accurate drug test to show they were no longer partaking in methamphetamines. Right here is when you know that DCYF did not follow their own protocol. They are the ones who gave Jordan and Andrew the conditions to get their children back, and they did absolutely none of them, but DCYF still gave Oakley and her siblings back to them. It does not make sense. On December 13, 2021, detectives on the case announced that they had finished searching the property, and unfortunately, that also meant that they had not found Oakley or enough evidence to make the manslaughter charges stick. On December 30th, Andrew and Jordan appeared in court for not providing Oakley's sister with her medication. The judge found probable cause for 1 count of abandonment of a dependent person in the 2nd degree against both Jordan and Andrew, which I am sure was not difficult, and bail was set for $150,000. The abandonment charge did not have anything to do with the case on Oakley, but the judge did state that the two clearly knew what had happened with Oakley and that the two were withholding that information. Unfazed, Jordan and Andrew pled not guilty to this charge, and later, when they were charged with endangerment with a controlled substance, they would plead not guilty to that as well. I guess accountability is not something that the two had any interest in, but how do you plead not guilty to your small children having meth in their system? It's not like they walked on down to the local crack dealer and bought a little meth. As all of this was going on, Jamie Jo was staying true to her nature and continued to fight with Eric by her side. The two of them continue to fight as hard as they can for Oakley. In February of 2022, Jamie Jo filed a complaint on behalf of Oakley's case with OAFCO. OAFCO is the Office of the Family and Children's Ombuds, and they investigate complaints about the actions or conduct of the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families. They are supposed to investigate any complaints about agency actions when involving any child at risk of abuse, neglect, or other harm that is involved with child protective services or welfare services. It was their job to investigate DCYF's actions throughout this case. Andrew Carlson ended up changing his plea, and on March 28th of 2022, Andrew Carlson was sentenced to 12 months in prison for 2 counts of endangerment with a controlled substance for exposing his children to methamphetamine. Judge Svoboda emphasized Andrew's lack of accountability, after Andrew stated to the court that he had made some mistakes. It kills me, you guys. The male voice you will hear in this video is Andrew Carlson, and pre-warning, it is nauseating.
I would like to say that I deeply regret my failings as a father. I haven't done a lot of things correctly in the last 7 years or so. I'm very ready to turn that around, and if I can't be a father to my children, then I can at least be an example that they can look at and say that I did the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
This is a tragic situation, but it's not for why. It's not because Mr. Carlson is sitting here. It's what these two children went through. And someone with any kind of a law enforcement background knows how dangerous and destructive methamphetamine is. And the idea that that would be used in a home with young children when you know how contaminating it is and how poisonous it is. The sentencing statement filed by Mr. Carlson denies that he ever used methamphetamine around the children and tries to place the blame solely on Ms. Bowers. However, in any condition, it's a father's job to protect their children. And you certainly failed in that, Mr. Carlson. These cases are frustrating for the court because we are limited by what the prosecution brings before us and what the legislature gives us as sentencing authority. Despite this being a Class C felony, I cannot sentence you outside the range of 6 to 12 months, with the exception of if I were to grant you first-time offender waiver. The only merit to a first-time offender waiver would be community custody, because I'm not convinced that you are going to follow through unless someone's watching you, because when you were out and you weren't being watched, by your own admission, you were not doing the right things. However, if I were to give you a first-time offender waiver, the standard range would be 0 to 90 days, and it's not commensurate with the crime. So based on the limitations before me, I'm going to do the most that I can. I'm going to oppose the 12 months, the crime victims assessment, the DNA collection fee. You are not to possess or consume controlled substances, including marijuana or THC, without a valid prescription. You are to obtain a chemical dependency evaluation within 45 days of your release. You are to follow up with any treatment recommended and provide proof to the court within 6 months of release. You are not to have under your possession control any firearms. You are not to have any unsupervised contact with anyone under the age of 18, with the exception of your biological children. Whatever is decided in the dependency court, it will be appropriate. That's being handled by another case. I don't know how you dig yourself out of this hole, Mr. Carlson, but you've earned every day. With earned early release, my guess is that he will be eligible for release sometime in August, Mr. Walker. Does that sound about right?
My records indicate he was booked on December 6, 2021. So I would assume that August, early August would be accurate.
So I want to set a review hearing for September. So Monday, September 12th at 9 a.m. Mr. Carlson, you'll need to perhaps check in with court administration. We may be back to in-person court by then, but either in person or by Zoom, whatever the court's protocol is at that time. I want to review your chemical dependency evaluation, because if you don't get that, there is simply no hope that you're not going to appear before me again. Mr. Walker, do you have a judgment and sentence?
I do, Your Honor. I need one point clarified. The court said no contact with children under the age of 18 except his own children as ordered by the family court, I believe.
No unsupervised contact.
Right. I'm sorry. No unsupervised contact. There is another child younger than the two at issue here with another woman that I don't think is the matter of any sort of family court case, as far as I know. Mr. Carlson would know better than I with his, so she's an 11-year-old daughter from his marriage. So given that that's not before the family court,
Is there a parenting plan in that case? Mr. Carlson, do you have a parenting plan with your older daughter?
I do, yes, in the divorce.
All right, then he may have contact as allowed by the parenting plan, and I assume the mother will bring that to court if it needs to be.
Unlike Jordan, Andrew had no prior convictions, and so he was sentenced to 12 months in jail. In addition to that, he was not allowed to possess or use controlled substances and was court-ordered to obtain a chemical dependency evaluation within 45 days of his release, which included any treatment recommended, and provide proof to the court within 6 months of his release. He is not allowed to own firearms, and he is not allowed to have unsupervised contact with anyone under the age of 18, with exception to his biological children. The judge stated that contact with his children would be decided in the dependency court, while allowing him to continue a parenting plan with his oldest child, who is not Jordan's. What a country we live in, where a dad can expose his 2-year-old and 6-year-old child to high levels of meth, neglect to give necessary medications to a 6-year-old child that could compromise her health-wise or lead to death on multiple occasions. Have a child go missing and not provide any help in finding her, and only get 12 months in prison, just a little slap on the wrist, and not just that, but be eligible to see those same kids that he could have unalived in multiple occasions. Whatever laws that are going on that allow this type of sentencing need to be changed. He should have absolutely no rights to prevent any ongoing or extra trauma for his children. In April of 2022, Jordan put in a request to be allowed telephonic visits with her children, and she included Oakley's name on that list. I don't get it, but thankfully the judge denied this motion. The only reason I can think of is she was trying to keep up the image that she had no idea what happened to Oakley. Jordan also took a plea deal and was sentenced to 20 months in prison for 2 counts of child endangerment, exposing her kids to high levels of meth, and the abandonment charges were dropped per the plea deal. Jordan's sentence was longer than Andrew's because she had previous violations. I am not a legal expert, but I don't fully understand why you drop charges when the evidence is stacked against you. But Jordan, just like Andrew, got a little slap on the wrist with a 20-month sentence, or so she thought. In May of 2022, Jay Inslee, the Washington state governor at that time, wrote to Ombudsman stating that he believed it was prudent and appropriate to request an examination of the agency's handling of the case, whether to affirm that DCYF followed all proper protocols and policies, and to identify if agency actions may have contributed to her disappearance. That same day, Patrick Dowd, an Ombudsman representative, contacted Jamie Jo for the first of many conversations asking her to detail where she felt DCYF had gone wrong. Jamie Jo went into great detail about DCYF's downfall in Oakley's case, including the times complaints were never followed through with, how she was ignored many times when she was reporting issues that could be detrimental to Oakley's well-being, how DCYF ignored protocols throughout Oakley's case, and how DCYF did not require Jordan or Andrew to show that they had made the necessary changes to make sure the home was safe for all of the children to return home to. All of which should have painted a picture of how the system had failed Oakley. In each conversation, Jamie Jo was told to talk openly and honestly, and in return, Patrick Dowd did not really give Jamie Jo any direction on what would happen moving forward. He stated that he couldn't release any information until a fatality review was done, and that he hoped one would be done. On August 3rd of 2022, Andrew Carlson was released from jail, and he is currently a free man living in Wenatchee, Washington. Andrew has somehow scapegoated the legal system, so if you see him, please give him a high five to the forehead, standing next to a cliff, or ask him where his daughter is. Keep the pressure on Andrew. The courts may not be able to hold him accountable yet, but we can. Remember this little speech Andrew gave the judge about being the example for his children?
If I can't be a father to my children, then I can at least be an example that they can look at and say that I did the right thing.
On August 12th of 2022, Andrew was a no-show for his mandatory chemical dependency hearing. Surprise, surprise. So the judge issued a warrant which prompted Andrew to show up for a later hearing where the warrant was squashed and a new date for the hearing was given. Andrew shows up 1 week later in a video hearing, and it is announced that Andrew still has not submitted the paperwork requested by the court to show that he has completed treatment. This just makes me so irritated that we are still giving chances after all that has been done. I would love to know if anyone has drug tested Andrew since this happened, and if they have held him accountable for the court-ordered stipulations that were put in place upon his release. He is out there in Wenatchee, living his best life like Oakley never existed. On August 9th of 2022, Patrick Dowd, the Ombud worker who had talked to Jamie Jo and received the request from Governor Inslee, reported that they were clearing DCYF of any wrongdoing in the case of Oakley Carlson. I will say that again, Patrick Dowd stated that they were clearing DCYF of any wrongdoing in the case of Oakley Carlson. The report stated, the OFKO investigation included a full review of all of the relevant records and documents and interviews with individuals with direct involvement or information about the department's handling of this case. Our investigation particularly focused on family reunification efforts, permanency planning, and the department's response to any identified child safety or risk factors prior to and after Oakley was returned home. We found that department's actions and conduct in this case were consistent with laws, policies, and court orders. Our investigation, however, identified opportunities to improve services to families and specifically to preserve and strengthen the parent-child bond when a child is removed from the home. Family time or parent-child visits are critical to promoting bonding, attachment, healthy child development, and successful family reunification. Our elected officials and agency leaders must ensure that adequate resources are dedicated to family time services so that parents and children receive the maximum visitation possible. Furthermore, reunification planning should not only focus on a parent's successful compliance with services, but should also address parent-child bonding and attachment issues. Basically bullshit, Governor Inslee released a statement and said the following: obviously, we are all concerned about that case, so I wanted to find out if there is anything amiss that had not been done correctly. And according to this letter, it came back and reported that the department had acted in compliance with existing rules and regulations. It doesn't mean that we are still not concerned about the case, but I'm pleased that we got that back. Also, basically bullshit. Something I learned while doing this case is that things can always get worse, and just wait until you hear what really happened in the home and how Oakley was treated after reunification. On January 15 of 2023, Jordan was released from prison, and in a twist of karma, she was rearrested moments later and charged with 3 counts of identity theft in the first degree, which is a Class B felony, and 1 count of identity theft in the second degree, which is a Class C felony. It turns out that during COVID, and while Oakley was missing, Jordan was busy scamming people out of their hard-earned money. Jordan had created 4 credit card accounts after stealing personal information from her family and friends. She then used the cards to rack up over $40,000 in charges at Walmart, on eBay, and also to feed her gambling addiction at casinos. 3 of these credit cards were discovered by the Tumwater Hotel where Jordan and Andrew were staying after their house fire. The hotel noticed the toilet was not working, and when they tried to unclog the toilet, they found a credit card that Jordan had attempted to flush down the toilet. When they continued to try to fix the toilet, they found 2 more credit cards stuffed into the tank of the toilet. The hotel had never had guests with these names, and all of them were connected to Jordan Bowers in some way. It was a truly shitty situation. See what I did there? But Jordan ended up being sentenced to the maximum sentence of 43 months in prison with 12 months of community custody. Let's hope that Jordan's prison sentence does not end there, because on July 25th, 2025, Jordan is set to be released, and that means in less than 10 days, a monster is back out on the streets. We have to find Oakley before she walks free. Jamie Jo and Eric did take in Oakley's brother for a couple of days, but they knew it wouldn't be right or fair to keep him while they were mourning Oakley. Jamie Jo described that in those moments they didn't want another child. They wanted their little girl, and at that time she let her foster care certification expire. I don't think anyone can understand the pain of losing a child, and especially not waking up each day and not knowing if she is out there. Oakley's brother was placed with family members and, from what is known, is doing well. And here we go. Jordan fought really hard for this not to come out, but in 2023, court records were released, and they detailed the abuse that Oakley endured in the home. Oakley's siblings testified that Oakley was locked in a cell underneath the stairs, that she was beat by Jordan, that they withheld food from Oakley, that Oakley started the couch fire with Mom's torch and got beat for it, and that Oakley had gone into the woods and been eaten by wolves. Her siblings shared that they felt that Oakley was not safe in her mom's care and that they were afraid she would starve. All of the siblings were told to not talk about Oakley. Keep in mind that these are young children, and detectives do not believe that Oakley was in the home at the time of the fire. Included in these records are details of how Jordan and Andrew would not cooperate when the scratches on Oakley's face were reported, and that DCYF investigated only 8 of the 11 reports received regarding Oakley. This really makes me wonder if maybe Jordan and Andrew started that fire on purpose so that they could say Oakley did not make it out, and they told the kids this so that they could confirm Oakley was in there when she wasn't. A lot of people have stated that law enforcement has let this case go cold, and I want to reiterate that this case is not cold. The Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office will never let it go cold, and they are in contact with Jamie Joe. They do follow all of the tips they are given. This case is very much alive, and this is why they need our help. There have been many rumors when it comes to Oakley's disappearance, rumors that she was sold to cover gambling costs and drug money, and that being the reason she had nothing in the home, rumors that she ran into the woods and got lost, and rumors stating the obvious, that Jordan and Andrew decided to do something they can't take back. Jordan and Andrew, to this day, state they just lost track of her somewhere around late November of 2021. That is their excuse and explanation. Where are the grandparents, you might ask? They released a statement around the time of Oakley's disappearance saying they were working with law enforcement. Basically more bullshit. Something I find absolutely disgusting in this case, which I noticed while researching, is the absolute lack of photos of Oakley, memories of Oakley, effort in finding Oakley, any effort in finding Oakley from any of the family members. None. All of the effort comes from Jamie Joe and Eric Hiles, Oakley's true parents, and their advocacy group, Light the Way. Jamie Joe is still pushing for an outside secondary review of DCYF and their involvement in this case. DCYF received 11 calls regarding Oakley and investigated only 8 of them. Governor Jay Inslee is no longer in power, but that does not take away his responsibility in Oakley's case and many other Washington state cases. While researching this case, I found that Governor Inslee has a history of failing to hold CPS accountable, and I wanted to know why we do not hold government officials accountable when a child is critically hurt or loses their life at the hands of neglect on that agency's part, and the answer is a corrupt system and money. That is why we are so willing to put a child back into the hands of monsters. The government does not want to spend more money helping these children have a safe environment in foster care, and so instead, they work on the reunification process as fast as possible. In 2015, Governor Inslee signed Aiden's Act into law, and it mandates that after a near fatality in the foster system, that DCYF is to conduct a review of the files of caseworkers assigned to the child. If it's found that the caseworkers violated a policy, rules, or state statute, the department is to conduct a formal employee investigation. However, in 2018, there was an 18-month-old baby that news sources call MD, who was in the foster care system. She was being well taken care of when CPS made the decision to return MD to her dad, who had a history of violence. 3 weeks after her dad began caring for her, he hurt her so violently that she had 16 rib fractures, liver and spleen lacerations, a brain bleed, facial bruising, and she suffered a heart attack upon her arrival at the hospital. While in the hospital, doctors found old rib fractures and healed burns indicating she had been hurt in the past. MD survived but can no longer walk, talk, feed herself, or see. There were a string of violations in this case, such as failure to conduct a criminal background check on the dad, failure to read a home study that showed the dad had inconsistencies about his violent history. They failed to do a court-ordered parenting assessment on the father. They failed to obtain a court-ordered paternity test. They told the judge in this case that there were no red flags when it came to the dad, but this was untrue. The dad had convictions for aggravated robbery, assault, drug convictions, including manufacturing and selling drugs, and domestic violence charges for beating his wife. There was no investigation of the dad prior to returning his child to him, but they did investigate the foster parents who loved MD. When MD was hurt, nobody was held accountable, and this highlights a major flaw in our system where the people are being gaslit with past laws and acts reportedly to protect children, only to have those in power not enforce them. This is not just a Washington state issue, it is a statewide issue across the nation where children are taken away from loving homes and put back into the hands of monsters who hurt them, unalive them, or the child disappears. We have to ask ourselves why there are so many kids returned to their abusers and why many state agencies have quotas to meet in terms of reunification. Are we placing the value on quotas over a child's life? How much is a child's life and well-being worth? Governor Jay Inslee swore in as a governor to represent the people of Washington for 3 terms. He represented all Washington families and people. Governor Inslee sent a generic response to anyone who emailed his office about Oakley. He then stopped responding to Jamie Jo. After that, he stopped responding to anyone who was an advocate for Oakleys. A national foster care advocate that works with Light the Way organized a meeting with Governor Inslee's staff, and they were told that Jamie Jo was not allowed to attend. This not only lacks integrity, but also shows the corruption in politics. Nobody has approved an outside secondary review of this case, and Jordan is found to be released from prison on July 25th of 2025 if we do not find Oakley. We need your help. Jamie Jo and Eric Hiles are still fighting vigilantly for justice for Oakley. They keep Oakley's name, face, and story out there as much as possible. Jamie Jo never miss an opportunity to demand justice and be on the forefront of this case. They have worked tirelessly to ensure Jordan and Andrew are held accountable. Light the Way, Oakley's advocacy group, have joined the Hiles for rallies and sat in on court dates that have anything to do with Oakley. Jamie Jo and Eric have organized searches. They raised the $100,000 reward for anyone who helps find Oakley through auctions and donations, and they have demanded change in an uphill battle against a corrupt government and remained vigilant in asking for an outside review of Oakley's case. Oakley's name and life has been honored through book drives and school supply drives to help kids who can't afford supplies. Oakley's light is still shining. In addition to this, the Hiles tried to pass House Bill 1397, the Oakley-Carlson Act, which aims to increase oversight of the reunification process for children whose parents have substance use disorders, and it requires drug abusers to have sobriety under their belt prior to reunification. It did not make it out of committee, and those who were not for it were concerned we would punish drug users who are not a danger to their child, as well as the workload this would create. It just really needs some fine-tuning. I have a friend who is in the Senate, and I have reached out to them. Shocking news that in Washington, you can be an active drug addict and still keep your kids if you don't pose a threat to them while on drugs. Welcome to the shit show.
Don't know dear, how much love you. Don't take my stress away.
Jamie Jo and Eric, I do not want to profit from your pain. If I got it wrong, or you do not like my video, I will take it down. I truly think the world of you both. I basically had to stalk your social media because I wanted to get this right. And what I found were 2 incredible people who are making a positive difference in this world. You are both selfless, loving, kind, strong, and brave. And I have no doubt that Oakley was the bright light that she was because of you. Jamie Jo, I saw a post where you said you felt like you failed Oakley, and no mom should ever feel that way. You did not fail Oakley. You showed her what a mom should be, You gave her unconditional love and a safe home, and I have no doubt that she knew how loved she was with you. You both gave her such a beautiful life when she was with you. I can't imagine the pain you are going through. I am very empathetic, and I cried so many times making this video. I truly want Oakley to come home. If there's anything I can do to help, please tell me. I am in Oregon. You are both unsung heroes, and there should be more people like you in this world. Bob Ferguson is now the governor of Washington State. Jamie Jo reached out to him in hopes of getting a secondary outside review of Oakley's case, and when Jamie Jo talked to him, he told her to call the Attorney General. However, prior to being governor, Bob Ferguson was the Attorney General, and when Governor Ferguson was the Attorney General, Jamie Jo contacted him and asked for a secondary outside review of Oakley's case, and he told her to go speak to the governor. I say we need to put a little pressure on the governor to step it up. If you would like to help with that, you can write a letter to Governor Ferguson and tell him that there should be a secondary review of Oakley's case. I have contacted friends in the media in hopes they will do a story on what has been happening and why there has been no outside review done. The second thing you can do is go to Light the Way's website or change.org and sign a petition asking for the secondary review. Links will be in the comments. Right now, they have 9,040 signatures, and when they get to the needed 10,000 signatures, Jamie Jo and Light the Way will march the petition right on down to Mayor Ferguson to ensure he gets it. This evil monster is going to walk free in 4 days. If you know anything, no matter how small the detail may be, please call it in. If you are scared to come forward, there are ways to protect you. If you know Jordan and Andrew, if you do not want to be involved, look at this beautiful little girl and know that nothing you say, nothing police can do, no sentence a judge can give, will ever be as harsh and painful as what they did to Oakley. We need your help. Oakley needs justice. Please come forward and do the right thing. Oakley went home to the two people who were supposed to love and protect her, and they failed her. They failed all of their kids. They need to be held accountable. To all the rest of you who stayed this long, thank you for watching my video. Please share Oakley on your social media platforms. It doesn't have to be my video. Just share her face so we can bring this little girl home and out the monsters responsible back in jail. Do not let Jordan walk free. With that, I have one more thing. I want to end on a happy note. Jamie Jo and Eric shared their journey with IVF and how much they wanted a child. When Oakley came, she made them parents for the first time, and now they have a new addition to the family. Jamie Jo was pregnant, and now they have a beautiful addition to their family and for Oakley to watch over. Just so you all know, I am going to post my small businesses in the comment section. I do not have sponsors right now, and this is the only income I have while battling lymphoma, and I have to pay for treatment. If you would like to check them out, please do. And if not, it is all good. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, share to help keep Oakley's story out there, and subscribe. I will be doing updates on my social media platforms. Until next time, stay safe out there, guys.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. And all the ways we been, I'll be spent right here up in the building, building up there. I know we nothing. It's gonna be made up there and switched up. Up in there, speed of people. Hey, I got a page. I'll see you in the day.